It rained like the sky was trying to drown me the day I was evicted from my parents' estate. Not the gentle rain that brings flowers to life. No. It was the kind that makes every breath seem like a blow to the ribs, stings your skin, and soaks your spirit. My duffel bag, which had been packed in 20 furious minutes, was now heavier with water than clothing as I stood at the bottom of our marble steps. Similar to a second betrayal, it stuck to my shoulder. My father exclaimed, "You're a disappointment, Oliver," in a voice that could cut through the storm. Every time I did something that didn't fit into her carefully manicured ideal of perfection, my mother would stand behind him in the doorway, her arms crossed and her mouth pursed in that perpetual pout. All I did was tell them that rather than becoming the next brick in Mason Industries, their priceless enterprise, I wanted to study computer engineering, the legacy of their golden child. She growled, "All these years have been preparing you for the company, and you discard it for what purpose? Applications." I was 18, recently received their high school diploma. And what did I do wrong? Rejecting the business school they chose and the life plan they drafted for me? Like if I were a goddamn worker? My father snarled, "If you leave now, don't ever return. No assistance, no inheritance, nothing." I repositioned my wet bag strap. It made contact with my shoulder, and I muttered, "All right." To them, that single sentence must have been like an earthquake, like they had seen a ghost. Their eyes widened. They were anticipating the previous version of me, the submissive, pleading son who would crumble under pressure like damp paper. But I had already drowned that version of myself. Somewhere in the years when I was compared to my ideal older brother, James, somewhere in the void between my real dreams and their expectations, I took a stroll. No umbrella, no vehicle. I didn't get any calls. Silence and rain. And as they chased me down the driveway, their voices, "Oliver, you're going to fail. You'll return with a stutter." I didn't turn around. The initial months were harsh, worse than they most likely had hoped. On the couch of my best friend Mike, I collapsed. I ate noodles that had gone bad, worked 2 jobs, delivering pizza at night and running an electronics business during the day. And every other second, coding, studying, failing, try once more. The scent of Red Bull and mold filled Mike's apartment. However, it was a haven. It was liberty. He would exclaim, "You're crazy, buddy." As he watched me crouched over my broken laptop at 4 in the morning, my fingers twitching and my eyes red. "Yes," I would murmur, "the good kind." The code eluded him. However, he understood me. He knew what being the underdog was like, a desire to create something that had not yet been created. After 6 months, I created a simple app that managed to attract the interest of a nearby startup. They offered me an entry-level dev job instead of money. Hours are flexible, sufficient room for me to continue working on my own projects. I quickly accepted it. Mason Industries, meanwhile, continued to construct equipment, instruments, the things that brought my grandfather a lot of money in the 1960s. My desire to work with ideas was never comprehended by them. With users, possibilities, code, and unseen systems, they believed that anything wasn't real if it wasn't hefty. But I studied the future, and they worshipped the past. Blockchain, AI, and digital ecosystems. The first year turned into the second. Next, 3. That stupid little app. It changed, turned into a full-fledged platform, AI-powered project management software. I gave it the name Nova Tech. Venture capitalists began to show interest. I was prepared. I was suddenly aware of my worth. The initial round of funding, $20 million sis the estimated value, triple that after 6 months. My new residence is a penthouse, recruited a group. Mike was appointed as my head of operations. One day, with coffee in one hand and incredulity in the other, he stood next to me and gazed out at the metropolitan skyline. He smiled and remarked, "From pizza deliveries to building the damn future." I grinned. However, I will always remember that rainy night. It was the duffel bag moment, the burden of it. Because they fail to disclose this to you. Solid ground is the bottom of the rock. Yes, it hurts, however. It's also where you lay the groundwork for something tangible. Then one day, on my desk, a name appeared. Mason Business. They were losing stock. Their empire is in ruins. They required assistance. With my heart as quiet as glass, I gazed at the numbers. My phone then rang. I hadn't seen that number in 7 years. My dad's. I gave it a single ring. Twice. 3 times. Oliver, you are a letdown. He'll return with a stutter. I took it up. I said, "Hello, Father," in a cold voice. I was anticipating your call. It seemed like a lifetime passed during the silence on the other end of the telephone. He cleared his throat after that. I recalled that same rigid, rehearsed sound from years of attending dinner talks and board meetings, as if he were getting ready to address a barrier rather than a son. "Oliver," he uttered softly. "We must speak." With the city skyline blazing behind me in tones of blue and ambition, I reclined in my chair. There was no family crest over the entrance of my office. It had technology that bowed to vision, iron will, and glass walls. "Yes," I said. "I think we do." Mason Industries remained the same. Everything felt like a bank vault, and the structure was still granite and frigid, etched with that old money arrogance. Above the entrance are the same gold letters. The security guard is likely wearing the same suit and has the same hairdo. However, I was different, subtle yet shrewd. I entered those doors wearing an Italian suit. No gaudy timepiece, just accuracy in each step and stitch. Not for them. For me, "Mr. Your father is waiting in the main conference room. Mason." The receptionist stumbled, her eyes widening as she recognized me. I gave a single, insufficient nod. She didn't inquire about my well-being. Nobody did. It seemed unreal to ascend the elevator to the top floor. I half expected ghosts from previous lectures to whisper to me from the walls. Accountability, legacy, make a sacrifice. Everything they had said to bind me to their pattern. There was a gentle ring as the doors opened. And there they were, Mom. She was as spotless as ever, but her makeup had ancient porcelain cracks in the corners. Her red-rimmed eyes, still. She exuded the same subdued contempt that she wore like perfume. James was standing close to the window. He had gained weight. The kind you don't notice until you realize something is pulling him down and the light strikes incorrectly. The golden boy had a corroded appearance. Then came my father, Richard Mason, who once removed me from his life like a cancerous growth. He got up and reached out, but changed his mind and dropped it like a botched bargain. He said, "Thank you for coming." I sat down across from him. Slowly, I set my briefcase down on the gleaming table as if it were full. "Let's cut out the small talk," I said. "I've looked at your numbers, already on the defensive." James turned. "Have you been snooping on us?" I arched an eyebrow. "James, you say, it's called reading public quarterly reports. A decline like yours is not easily concealed." At the word, "your," my mother winced. "Not us. No more." My father started talking incoherently about the volatility of the market, worldwide changes, disturbance. They believed it to be strategy, the sort of boardroom theater. I interrupted. "You are bleeding out as a result of your refusal to change, nowadays. Manufacturing involves more than simply steel and gears. It also involves software, incorporation. You're utilizing a rotary phone in a digital environment thanks to predictive AI." James laughed. "And with your tiny apps and widgets, I suppose you're the expert now?" I refrained from arguing. I just took out my phone, gave it a single swipe, and displayed Novatech's growth statistics on their opulent conference screen. $500 million in earnings, 300% rise in a single year, collaborations with 5 Fortune 500 companies. Like gunpowder, the numerals lingered in the atmosphere. Mom looked at me. You are Novatech's founder, CEO, I said, as well as the majority shareholder. After then, there was a wonderful silence. Just before the wave crashes, it's like holding your breath. Finally, my father remarked, "I need $5 million. A loan for a bridge to buy us time. Update, get better." I opened my briefcase and stated, "I'm not interested in loans. Like a final exam." I laid a hefty bound contract on the table. "I'm here to acquire, like thunder." The words slammed into the room. James's face flushed. Do you wish to purchase us? Your own household? I grinned without a sense of humor. At your engagement party, did you not disclose that you were the only child? I'm only honoring your story. He stopped. Like a broken mirror, I watched the astonishment seep into his features. My mother softened her tone, the same manipulative tone she used when she tried to force me to read balance sheets rather than code, and said, Oliver, you still have us as parents. No, I replied. You were, once. This is business now. The conditions of the deal were generous, more than they were due. $25 million, keeping most of the employees, complete digital integration, an opportunity to live, perhaps even relevancy, in fact, and us. James let out a bark. What are we given? As I put it, you get jobs, authentic ones, earned, not inherited as heirlooms during the changeover. The father would act as a counselor, then take a break. Pension, of course. I wasn't mean. Mother could grow her clientele by using her connections, if she so desired. They kept quiet. I said, refuse. And you can tell shareholders why you missed your last opportunity. Your stock declines by an additional 50%. You might be gone in 2 months. Then it's done, as he reached for the contract. My father's hand shook. You planned this, said James in a whisper. No, I said, getting to my feet. I was too focused on being successful. How much time do we have to make a decision? My mom inquired. Midnight, the first said. Not another minute. With a hoarse voice, my father stood up. There isn't enough time. I cocked my head. I have 5 minutes to make a decision about my future. You have 12 hours from now. That is more than reasonable. I started to leave, but stopped at the door. An additional item. They raised their eyes. Use the same pen you used to deny my college plans when you sign, and you will sign. His eyes showed it to me. That pen came back to him. Trim in gold, the logo of Mason Industries, cold, costly inertia. He still had it on his desk. I was aware, I said. I'll be back at 11:45 a.m. to arrive on time. Money is time, that's what you've always taught me. Right. I saw a reflection of myself in the mirrored wall as I descended in the elevator. Not the boy who was expelled. A man, a tempest. And that was just the beginning. The pen that attracted blood. 11:43 p.m. Outside, the city glistened like a field of broken stars, with neon, glass, and aspiration all interwoven over a skyline that used to seem so far away from me. It was mine now, with my hands in my pockets. I stood at the same window where James had been earlier, observing as the lights outside blurred my reflection. I used to be prohibited from speaking in this workplace unless someone spoke to me. Right now, the only person in the room who mattered was myself. The door opened with a squeak. They arrived on schedule. They were, of course. There are always some who are desperate. It appeared as though someone had taken an eraser to my dad. His cheeks were paler. The weight of realization caused the shoulders to sag. Not aging, his pride had blown up in his face. He had a little leather case in his hand. Before he opened it, I knew what was inside. The acquisition has been approved by the board, he stated. He had a scratchy voice. Uniformly, he continued. I didn't wince. I simply turned and absorbed the scene like a deep breath. To my surprise, my mother's dress was wrinkled. Her necklace and earrings weren't the same. She appeared as like she had lost control of her day, which was noteworthy. James was slumped in a chair with his collar open and his tie pulled down. He appeared to have aged 10 years in a single day. You've prevailed, James whispered. Did you want to hear that? I gave a shrug. Not at all. The truth is what I want from everyone. They looked at each other. The room became silent. My mom was the first to speak. What is the truth? Why? I muttered. You really shoved me out. Business school wasn't the only thing involved, was it? That flash in my father's eyes was there. The pause, similar to the time before a levee ruptures. You resembled him too much, he finally remarked. Quiet. Like whom? I knew already, but I asked. Your grandpa, he answered. Mason. Harold. He pushed himself down into a chair as if his bones were heavy with the weight of uttering his name. Then my father added, he was a visionary. Be the first to see the future. He automated production lines in the 1960s before anyone really understood what it meant, took chances, large ones, updated everything. They all said he was crazy. He took a deep swallow. He was disowned even by his father, referred to him as careless, a betrayer of custom, abruptly. I caught sight of it. Not simply my father's eyes from all those years ago, which were filled with despair. The terror, I said. You didn't hate me for having a different dream. You were afraid that I might succeed by following his example. I would outgrow you. He turned his head away. We believed we were defending you, my mother muttered. James laughed. What is he being protected from? Being superior to us. Weary. My father turned to him. James, you were the safe option, trustworthy, contained. It was exactly what I needed. I wanted predictability after seeing my father waste everything. You understand, James yelled. And you went straight to bankruptcy as a result. The strain caused the tension to break like glass. With my palms against the wood, I made my way to the table. Let's stop acting like this is about me. The business is dying. You have two options, either allow it to grow or let your ego destroy it. My dad took out the pen case. It was there, plated in gold, heavy. That carefully folded piece of business rejection in. A velvet envelope was the exact one they had used to sign my rejection letter 7 years prior. Gently, he set it next to the contract. He said, I need to know something, prior to signing. What took place after that? I stopped. For a minute, I viewed him as a man who wanted to understand, rather than as the one who tossed me out. So I told him. I told him about the springs that punctured my ribs every night on Mike's couch, how I toiled till my hands cramped and my eyes got bloodshot, how the same individuals who used to attend our dinner parties were served pizzas by me. But above all, I explained freedom to him. I claimed that being at the bottom allowed me to fail without feeling guilty, and I gained knowledge each time I failed. Every little victory felt like climbing a mountain. On my phone, I launched the initial version of the Novatech app. Horrible, clunky, incredibly nimble. But I answered. It worked, and everything improved. I did the same, perhaps for the first time. James listened intently as he leaned in. And the money? He inquired. I said, they didn't find me. I created something so strong that they were unable to ignore it. They had to demonstrate that they were deserving of my vision by the time they appeared. The pen was taken up by my father. In his hand, it trembled a little. And once we've signed, he inquired, what actually happens to us? I made eye contact with him. That's exactly what I stated. James begins at the bottom, earns his way. If mother so chooses, she maintains the social connections. Additionally, I stopped. You get to watch the business grow into what it ought to have been. The way he would have desired it. He gazed over the agreement. After that, slowly, I put pen to paper. The scratching of ink on the page may have passed for thunder. Next to sign was my mother, quiet, sad. Without hesitation, James signed. I grabbed the contract. My father, however, grabbed my wrist before I could. Not difficult. It's just urgent. His voice cracked as he murmured, Oliver, I apologize. For everything. I glanced at his hand below, at the same fingers that once told me to never return and directed me in the direction of the door. And I added, I understand. I didn't smile, though. Forgiveness is one thing. It takes longer to trust. My mom came forward, her voice faltering. Will you ever pardon us? The contract was stuffed into my briefcase, I said, years ago. I forgave you. That's the reason I'm here, rather than letting it burn. Save what's left. And us, James inquired. Can we reunite as a family? I examined each one. They had poor posture. Their hands were empty. It depends, I said. Is it possible for a family to define success, not by how effectively it maintains the past, but rather by how courageously it creates the future? They took a while to respond, but they nodded, one after the other, and it was sufficient. For the time being, I turned around after walking to the door. The board will meet at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Avoid being late. We need to re-establish our business. Around me, the elevator doors closed, and I remembered that 18-year-old child wet to the bone, carrying only a duffel bag and a half-dead dream. As I made my way down into the lobby of the identical building I had been expelled from, if someone had predicted that he would eventually buy the property, it would have been unbelievable to him. That's the problem with dreams, though. They don't require authorization, only someone who is obstinate enough to pursue them. The silence following the storm, 8:57 a.m. the following morning. In what was originally Mason Industries and was now officially known as Novatech Industrial Division, I was seated at the head of the long meeting table. There was no longer a gold logo on the wall. Overnight, a fresh, illuminated glass with the new name inscribed on it took its place. Contemporary, minimalist, unrepentant. Tension and the smell of fresh paint filled the room. Mike was also present, tablet in hand, navy blazer, no tie. He seemed unable to accept that any of this was genuine as he gazed around. "You know how the boardroom looks when it's yours," he muttered. I smiled half-heartedly. "Yes," I said. Resonance is reduced. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doors opened. My family entered, and they appeared to be employees for the first time in 7 years. Not a nobleman. James was dressed in a suit, not customized, not dazzling, only a suit. In one hand, he held a pen, and in the other, a notebook, actual tools, not a prop. Mom's hair was tied back into a low bun. A gentler shade of her signature bright red lipstick took its place. I knew the expression and acted modestly. But underneath that, there's another factor: effort. In addition, my dad didn't wear a tie, only a shirt with a collar and rolled-up sleeves. It was odd, almost precarious. He nodded slightly to me and sat down in the middle of the table. At the head, nobody sat. I owned that. "Good morning," I said plainly. "Let's get started. Don't be theatrical, no disrespect, just business." A 3-month roadmap for integrating old systems into Novatech's digital architecture was the first item on the agenda. Mike was given the task by me. He didn't recoil. The next step is to reassign leadership positions. One of our senior developers would be shadowed by James. No shortcuts, no titles. He gave a nod, didn't dispute. It seemed unreal. No one was shouting. Don't pretend. The long wooden table was not silently judged. Reasonable choices, activities, advancement. My mother stayed after the meeting as people left. "Your grandfather would be proud," she murmured gently, almost painfully. I looked her in the eyes. I remarked, "He believed in risk. I learned to fear it from you." She looked down. "I was mistaken," she acknowledged. The words lingered. Perhaps that was sufficient. For the time being, I went down on the elevator with Mike. He looked aside and continued. "So, it was unexpectedly polite." "Yes," I said. "Too polite?" He grinned. "You look good as a paranoid boss." I didn't respond. My thoughts were elsewhere, because the acquisition wasn't the actual conflict. It was the result. We started the impossible task of combining the spirit of a tech giant with the bones of a dying legacy company over the course of the following 6 weeks. The factories were steel monsters from a bygone era. However, I didn't want to stop them. I desired to awaken them. We set up real-time dashboards, predictive maintenance systems, and smart sensors. Each machine was connected to a more intelligent device, like a man experiencing color for the first time. James saw it all. "You were attempting to construct anything like this?" he inquired once in a quiet voice. "I'm not trying," I answered. "Actioning." To his credit, he refrained from arguing. He paid attention. We were strolling across the floor one afternoon when I was stopped by an elderly machinist. He pointed to a grease-stained area close to a conveyor belt and remarked, "Your grandfather once shook my hand right here, told me that if you look after the machines, they will look after you." I gave a nod. He was correct. His eyes narrowed as he gazed at me. He remarked, "You look like him. However, your speech is distinct. Relax. Reduce the fire." I grinned. Perhaps I should just conceal it better. It wasn't always easy behind the scenes. The stockholders were cautious. The shift was resented by some staff. I've been known to leave meetings with my fists clenched in my pockets. However, each time I struck a wall, I thought of the rain, the duffel bag, that evening. I also pushed. I discovered James staring at a screen full of code in the break room one evening. He tightened his teeth and nervously tapped his pen. Are you stuck? I inquired. He raised his head. The reasoning isn't sound. The language is the problem. He was seated across from me, demonstrated to him, line by line, how the structure operated. He didn't speak out. Simply listen. He leaned back and closed the laptop after I was done. He remarked, I used to think I was better than you, because I followed their instructions, as I am a good fit. And now, he cast his gaze downward. I think now that maybe I was just scared. I gave a nod. Me too. We didn't give each other hugs, didn't weep, simply sat in the quiet. Two brothers, making an effort. The letter then arrived, mailed, stamped, not sent by email, from a woman who used to serve on my grandfather's board. Elizabeth Reed, retired now, sharp as ever. She was aware of the purchase, about me. She wrote her note by hand. According to your grandpa, the family line was plagued with either comfort or eyesight, but never both. You seem to have disproved him. Excellent. Continue. I read it 3 times. I folded it, placed it in the drawer of my desk, not because I required approval. However, it made me realize that even spirits are aware of what is happening. Mason Industries was not a story about deterioration 6 weeks following the takeover. It was a rebirth case study. It was dubbed the Lazarus of legacy manufacturing in several articles. I was referred to as the boy who bought his past. However, I didn't give a damn about that. This was all that mattered to me. Once more, the machines were humming. They were also using our language this time. Future events don't happen twice. It was a Tuesday. It won't rain this time. Just sunshine slicing like small ribbons of gold through the office blinds. It's the kind of morning that quietly awaits your notice without demanding it. I was standing in the chairman's former office. The office of my granddad. The office of my father. Mine now. Rooms remember people, which is funny. You can practically smell their assurance in the leather chairs and hear the echoes of their voices in the grain of the wood. However, they no longer felt like they belonged in this room. It was like mine, not because of the door's title. Since I merited the privilege of standing here without apologies, someone knocked. Not the tentative sort, the type of person who says, I belong here too, I said. Come in. Holding a clipboard that he most certainly didn't need, Mike intervened. He hardly managed to hide a smile as he remarked, We just closed the international deal, making an Asia-Pacific completely integrated by Q3. I gave a nod. And the divisions of legacy. He looked down. They're adjusting. Slowly. However, they are adjusting. Well done. He paused. What? I inquired. He grinned. Will you tell them, or need I to? I understood his meaning. For weeks. I had been putting it off. On Friday, the announcement will be made, I stated. Mike blew a little whistle. Are you already retired, old man? I grinned. Just switching roles. That afternoon, I stepped out onto the production floor. Not for show, only to sense it. The cadence. The roar of movement, of metal fulfilling its function. James was standing next to a young engineer who was explaining a new prototype while nodding. He had his sleeves rolled up. He had questions, listening, failing to perform. The outline of a real guy stepping into something his own, rather than the shadow of our father, was what I guess I had always hoped to see in him for the first time. I looked at him. I nodded slightly to him. He gave it back, and it was sufficient. My father was seated by himself in the executive lounge that evening, not holding a drink, just his face in the end of the day's light, and quiet. I walked up to him, and he looked up. He remarked, You make me think of him, grandfather. He gave a nod. Not the aspect of him that founded the business. The portion that was able to release tension. I didn't sit down. I wasn't asked to. Quietly, he remarked, I used to think that keeping things the same was a form of love. That honoring legacy meant preserving it. And now I think maybe love is letting it change, he said, looking up at me, allowing it to develop into something better. I remained silent. Did not have to. He got up, slowly, and my father provided me a helping hand for the first time in my life. Not as a dad. To another guy, as a man, I gave it a shake. It also seemed genuine. Friday arrived. It was announced Oliver Mason, the man behind the Mason acquisition and the creator of Nova Tech, would be retiring from his position. Not going to retire, not going away, simply developing. The industrial division's new chief executive officer, Mason, James. When I told him, he didn't cry. All he said was, "Are you sure? You've earned it," I said. "Just remember why this location is still here," he gave a nod. "Because you had faith in it when others did not." "No," I clarified. "Because I had faith in myself." That evening, Mike and I sat on the building's roof with our footwear off and drinks in hand. He said, "Wild ride." As he gazed over the metropolis, "It still is," I said. He sipped. "Do you ever reflect about that evening, the precipitation, the duffel bag?" "Daily." "Would you go back and change anything?" he asked, turning to face me. I considered it, regarding the discomfort, the quiet, the evenings when you couldn't sleep, the isolation, the thirst for evidence as well as nourishment. "No," I replied, because all of that was the cost of being aware of my identity. I occasionally go back to the building where I was originally evicted. I don't do it for sentimental reasons. I do it because each time I pass the location when I was 18, wet to the bone and banished by blood, I am reminded of, I wasn't broken by that moment. The illusion was broken. And that's where the real action starts. I get asked for guidance these days. Youthful founders, sons disowned, women attempting to demonstrate that they are more capable than any guy at managing the family. Business. "How did I do it?" they ask. And I say the same thing every time. They will say that dreams are brittle. However, the reality is that people are. Dreams. They can withstand storms. In the dark, they wait. They never knock more than once. Therefore, if one arrives at your door, even if it's raining so heavily that you can't see clearly, take your bag and flee. Oliver Mason was who I was, the letdown, the absentee, the one who was turned down, the person who dreams, right now, before the world told him to be someone else. I was just a man who recalled who he was. And that's sufficient. It has always been sufficient.